guys. I would love for you to introduce yourself to those who might not have met you.
Okay, so currently I'm a project manager for a not-for-profit called The Next Economy. It's a very, very new business, and but just recently I've spent most of my time the last 10, 15 years working at Food Connect as the general manager. And Food Connect is a social enterprise that was started by my partner Rob Pekin, who's an ex-dairy farmer and really wanted to create a fairer food system, one that rewarded farmers and growers fairly and using true cost of production principles, but also at the same time removing as much of the middlemen in the food system and providing a direct connection to our eaters, so that they could get the benefit of super fresh, beautiful, healthy, nutritious, organic produce, but also have an opportunity to, acknowledge the growers and, contact them and talk to them and, connect, basically. So we've been doing that for a long time, and more recently, as you know, Rob and I embarked on a campaign last year to join our community, to buy our warehouse that we'd been renting part of, for 12 years. And our landlord agreed to sell it to us. And after a 3-month campaign, we managed to get 513 careholders, as we like to call them, not shareholders, to buy the building with us. So now we own our own infrastructure, which is awesome.
I think that's amazing. I've had the good fortune of interviewing Robert about the intense 3-month campaign that was your...
Never again.
Never again, all right. Well, that answers one of the questions for later. But maybe you can tell us a bit about how a careholder differs from a shareholder and why you chose that name.
Well, it was kind of an accidental term. It just sort of popped up in one of our conversations during, preparing for the campaign. And what it really speaks to is that the sort of values that we're trying to promote and attract in our shareholders and our investors. So we're not offering just a financial return if you invest in us. We're actually offering an opportunity to experience, ethical ways of doing business, and, an avenue to collaborate with fellow careholders and maybe start some ideas and projects of your own. So it's really important to us that collaboration is sort of very prominent in terms of how we do things here. So really sort of, doing the opposite of competition. And we try and embody that in different ways that we work. But also to, reinforce the concept of investors not being owners in a business, but actually being custodians of a business. And so careholders in that respect are really important because it reminds them just in the term that that they're not just there for the money, that they're there. There is a sense of responsibility to this place that goes beyond just having a financial stake.
Yeah. I loved when we discussed with Robert, and I'll include a link to that interview in this interview for people. But he said that something like 95% of the investors were local and 95% of the investors were female. And when you generally in the economy hear about investors, the stereotype is a man in a suit, probably on Macquarie Street or something like that in Sydney. But what I think you guys did, you got the biggest crowdfunding raise in 2018, and you did that with people motivated for a fairer food system and an economic justice motivation. Just incredible stuff. But let's move out of the esoteric a bit. But as having these 513 careholders, are they good for business, and in what ways?
Yeah. So yes, definitely. I mean, not all of them, of course, buy with Food Connect directly, unfortunately, but they all have their own reasons. But a lot of them were existing customers of Food Connect. So yes, it is good for business, because what it means is now that they have a financial stake in it, they actually will continue to buy with us, because they know that if Food Connect, the social enterprise, is successful, then it will continue to pay its rent. And paying rent is what will get them a dividend at the end of each financial year eventually. So that's like, a very practical reason why, having customers as shareholders is a great thing. I guess also they also become an ambassador for you in many ways. So, who knows how many people are influenced by that investment and by that, purchase decision in their own circles. And, some people who have been, investors and may not necessarily engage with us through our social enterprise, also have discounted access to our event space and have invested purely because of that. Because here in sort of like the inner to medium outskirts of Brisbane, inner south, there's, community spaces are at a premium. There's just not much around for people to get together and hire a space affordably to, do something like politics in the pub, or a little wedding, or, whatever it is, a film night, whatever that might be. So having an event space here that's accessible and affordable is also equally important, but it also speaks to one of the principal values that we're driven by, which is, community and collaboration with each other, and, trying to create a better world.
Well, I think it's fantastic, because you've taken a food delivery box and business and turned that into a food hub with a sense of place, a real purpose. Not to dwell on this, but being realistic, what have been the challenges with having 500? I mean, aside from the initial raise, we're now like 12 months in, you've got 513 bosses, or how does it work for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been really pleasantly surprised by everyone's, enthusiasm. We've had a really good dose of people sort of just knocking on the doors, wanting to be more involved as shareholders. And I guess, it was a bit of a challenge at first trying to find jobs for people to do. Like, we had so many offers of help, just in terms of voluntary help. So having to get really organised very early on with, okay, well, what are the high priority projects that need to be done, and are people going to get a lot out of it? So there's sort of like the double-edged sword of, yes, we need some really hard, boring things to be done, but where's the fun in that? So, having to sort of juggle that has been a challenge, but it's also been, a wonderful surprise as well. So we've had people like, landscape the garden for us. We've had careholders renovate the bathrooms and paint beautiful murals. We've had offers of administrative support, bookkeeping, and the list goes on. So it's just been incredible, really. Still waiting for someone to want to start a co-op or a retail shop here on site. So if anyone out there is a careholder and wants to take that on.
And no tour operators as well, so.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So it's been good. But then, of course, when you sort of make your plans, you also have to acknowledge that when you involve other people, a lot of your deadlines need to be pushed out. So often things can take, twice as long as you would normally expect. But in saying that, it's just been a wonderful experience. And we've had a few people sort of, remind us that, we are a public unlisted company and we need to report more on the financials and all that sort of stuff. But, we're ticking all the boxes in terms of our tax and legal compliance. It's been mostly wonderful. Yeah, we've had very few people wanting to pull out. I think we could count them on less than one hand. People sort of wanting to find or pull their money out and want to, find a buyer. So as a company, it's up to us to be able to do that. So we need to, well, not up to us, it's actually up to a third party legally to arrange share transfer. We're thinking of creative ways to do that at our AGM is actually if you want to sell shares, well, then you must turn up to the AGM because we're only going to trade them person to person. And you guys can do that up the back of the room in real time without us, actually having a hand in it. So yeah, there's lots of different things that you have to consider, but it's been great. Plenty of work to do. Hasn't stopped yet.
Well, let me ask you a few things. The reason for our call was would have loved to have you speak at the Commonwealth event where stakeholders get a stake and how that changes the economy locally and the economy within that business. And so stick with that for a little while.
Yeah.
If you're a director of an enterprise that's considering giving stakeholders a stake, whether that be employees or the consumers of your product, locals in the community, what advice would you give to them? You're a pioneer in this, so I think people will be interested in your response. Yeah.
I think one of the lessons that we learned out of the whole exercise, particularly during the campaign, was if you are going to go down the equity crowdfunding route or any sort of crowdfunding, is that you really need to engage your crowd very early and get them excited and get them educated about equity crowdfunding, because that was a huge piece that we didn't anticipate. We kind of underestimated the need to educate people about how it worked. So I would say spend a lot more time before you hit the go button on your campaign to really not just educate your crowd, but also get them to commit before you launch. Work out how much money you've already got committed before you actually launch, so you know what you're dealing with. Because then once they've committed, they then become your advocates as well, and that makes your whole marketing and campaigning a little easier. So that's probably one piece of advice that I would take away from the experience. In terms of longer term stuff, I think it's probably really important to get your expectations, to set your expectations realistically. ASIC helps you do that in terms of not allowing you to provide forecasts or not over-promising anything in terms of dividends and returns on your investment. But I think even for yourselves, the crowdfunders, you need to be very realistic about how much money you can actually raise. And I think, knowing what we know now, if we had have done it over again, I think that the limit that we set ourselves was a bit too high, and that we probably would have gone for half of that amount. And I think, probably spent a little bit more time securing, the initial 50% before launch. That would have been in hindsight, that probably would have been a wiser thing to do. But, we got there in the end by some miracle. And one of the things that we didn't, that we have struggled with a little bit is that, even though we did raise the minimum, we actually, to make it really clean and to allow us to really hit the ground running with our business plan post-raise, we actually needed to secure a little bit more funding. So at the moment we've been, going out seeking a little bit more to finish off a few bits that we just didn't get to because we didn't raise enough money. So that sort of has slowed progress down a little bit for us. Yeah.
Well,
So while I say
question, do you mean that having the equity crowdfunding raise with 513 investors has made it easier or harder to get the additional private capital into the business?
Oh, no, it's made it a lot easier. So we've attracted additional capital basically because the building really wasn't fit for purpose. Like some parts of it were, and they were functioning really well. But there were other parts of it where, we really want to maximise the return to investors and have as many tenants, leasing the space as possible, which requires us, have to make sure that, around 80% of the building floor space is leasable. So we do need to actually do a bit of work to do that. But by being able to tap in to our crowd, we've been able to raise additional funds with relative ease without having to go out to market again. So it's been incredibly beneficial from that perspective because they get you and they trust you. They've already worked with you, and they want to contribute more if they're in a position to do so. Yeah, so it's been great.
Wow, what a great testament to getting stakeholders in.
Yeah.
So what do you see the future then for the Food Connect business, the foundation which supports the Food Hub? What does the next 12 months look like? And then what do you think the next 5 years looks like for that?
Yeah. So one of the things that, of course, Rob and I struggle with is doing too many things. So we've had to think seriously about getting help. So we've chosen to this year build the board of the Food Connect Shed. So we've got an additional 4 people coming on to the board in the next month. And they've got specific skills that will take us to the next phase. So for Food Connect Shed as a food hub, to really complete on our vision, we need to go through a master planning process to sort of, and a community engagement process with our careholders. So that will be taken care of this year by our board. We'll lead that. That will then free up the Food Connect Foundation to focus on advocacy and education and events using the shared event space, but also other spaces as well. And it will also free the foundation up to work on the IP. So, a food hub can take many forms, but we feel that we have some special things that, could be of value. So we really need to bring in some expertise to help us write all of that up. So that we can actually create a model that's replicable, because we can foresee, particularly with climate change impacts and the need to relocalise our economy, that regional food hubs are actually going to be one answer to creating resilient communities. So by being able to kind of package all that up into a replicable model is a piece of work that we really need to get on with. Unfortunately, there's no one out there saying, here, I'll give you a bunch of money to sit on your bum for 6 months to write all this up. So anyway, hopefully that will come eventually. We just need to chip away.
So if I summarise, is it 12 months, build the board, 5 years, build a replicable model, and do you hope, or do you have designs on the next region, or how will you work that out? Will that come through your careholders? What's that decision-making process look like?
I think it will be a little bit of both. I think it will be, it'll come from our careholders, because we've already had requests from some of our larger investors to go into a couple of their regions. And also I think it will come from government or communities that will go, sorry about that child, that will go, it will come from communities, either driven by local government or by state government, we think, in terms of creating resilient communities and trying to, invest in some practical solutions on the ground.
Excellent. Well, I've just had a child of mine walk in as well.
It's impossible.
It's
absolutely impossible during school holidays.
Oh, g'day, Rob.
Sorry, it's chaos. You can edit that out.
We might leave it in. I think that one of the things about stakeholders having a stake is the families of employees, right? They are true stakeholders in any business, and we forget them.
We do. We don't. They don't let us forget them.
Yeah. But I think that they're such huge supports to founders, to the employees, and they don't get identified frequently as a stakeholder group, but I think they're very definitely there.
They're definitely a stakeholder, that's for sure. And I mean, the kids are the reason why we're doing a lot of this. It's their future.
Excellent. Well, I've got one more question for you. What do you, for people who are considering giving stakeholders a stake, what's something that's a burning thought for you that they should be considering? Not necessarily advice, but don't miss this sort of thing.
I don't know. I think one of the hardest things, so we've got all the solutions in the world to tackle climate change. We really do. We've got a lot of wealth and privilege in this country, but we don't really have behaviours that drive collaboration or deepen relationships. And so I think creating community is really the challenge for us as a society. We're just not good at it. We've been socialised to compete. We've been socialised to survive, dog eat dog. So I really feel that when you're thinking about inviting stakeholders to have a financial and emotional investment in what you're doing, that it's just really important to be open to deepening your relationships and to do a bit of personal work, because it's an inside job. A lot of what's happening externally can be solved by working on what's happening on the inside.
Beautiful. Well, it's genuinely beautiful. I love that it's an inside job, and the work needs to be in the community. Yeah. I think final comment from me is the thing that you got right that most crowdfunding doesn't get right is most focus on the funding and not the crowd. And that's why 50% or more of rewards crowdfunding campaigns don't work. And it's why you guys, got $2 million in very adverse circumstances in a novel market, in a novel time for a business that you promised would not be a unicorn. And, that really flew in the face of convention and seems to be going off. So, thank you, Emma Kate.